100 amazing historical facts. Some of these facts and more are included in History Hits Miscellany. Facts, figures, and fascinating finds, published by Hodder and Stoughton and on sale now. To make the list more robust and remarkable, if you have a correction or suggestion, please let me know in the comments. Dear friends, we are starting a journey that will increase your awareness and knowledge. Without further ado, I will start with your permission. Dictators together. In 1913, Stalin, Hitler, Trotsky, and Tito all lived in Vienna for a brief period. While they were indeed all in Vienna around this time, historians debate whether they ever crossed paths. Hitler was living as a struggling artist, Stalin was researching Marxism, Trotsky was working as a journalist, and Tito was serving in the Austro-Hungarian army. Colonial background. The first British officer killed in World War I was an Englishman born in India, serving in a Scottish regiment while commanding Senegalese troops in Togoland, modern-day Togo. This illustrates how colonial forces were integrated into the war effort right from the beginning. Record-breaking vaccine. Before COVID-19, the record for developing and licensing a vaccine was 4 years, held by the mumps vaccine, licensed in 1967. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine received emergency authorization in the UK in December 2020, after just 11 months of development, setting a new record. Several other COVID vaccines followed closely behind, revolutionizing vaccine development timelines. Absent monarch. Richard the Lionheart only spent about 6 months of his 10-year reign, 1189-1199, in England. He spent most of his time fighting in the Crusades and defending his territories in France, viewing England primarily as a source of revenue. Day of Fate. November 9th, Schicksalstag, or Day of Fate, has repeatedly marked crucial events in German history. In 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. In 1923, Hitler attempted the Munich Beer Hall Putsch. In 1938, the Kristallnacht pogrom against Jews occurred. And in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. This date continues to hold special significance in German collective memory. 6. The deadliest shark attack incident. When the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine on July 30th, 1945, survivors were stranded in the water for nearly 5 days. Approximately 600 men died from exposure, dehydration, salt poisoning, and shark attacks. Marine biologists consider this the worst series of shark attacks on humans in recorded history, though many deaths were from other causes. Loss of horsepower. Napoleon took around 180,000 horses with his Grande Armée during the 1812 invasion of Russia. Only about 1,600 returned, with most dying from extreme cold, starvation, and exhaustion, highlighting the logistical disaster of the campaign. Race at war. During World War I, France's colonial troops from Africa suffered casualty rates approximately 3 times higher than white French soldiers. They were often assigned to the most dangerous missions and sent to the deadliest sectors of the front, reflecting the racial discrimination embedded in colonial military structures. Police state. The Metropolitan Police Act of 1839 criminalized various public nuisances in London, including knocking on doors and running away, flying kites, singing obscene songs, and sliding on ice in the street. While technically still on the books, these offenses are rarely enforced today, though they can technically carry fines up to $500. Japanese samurai rituals. Before battle, Japanese samurai often engaged in elaborate preparations, including painting their faces and horses, blackening their teeth, a practice called ohaguro, and ensuring their helmets had a small opening, teihen, through which the warrior's soul could escape if killed in battle. Illegal drunkenness. Since the Licensing Act of 1872, it has technically been illegal to be drunk in a licensed premises, pub, in the UK. While rarely enforced for simple intoxication, this Victorian-era law remains part of Britain's licensing regulations. Mammoth contemporaries. When Egypt's major pyramids were being built, co. 2500 BCE, a small population of woolly mammoths still survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic. These dwarf mammoths, the last of their species, didn't die out until around 1650 BCE, meaning they outlived the mammoth mainland populations by thousands of years. Genghis Khan's genetic legacy. Genghis Khan fathered an extraordinary number of children through numerous wives and concubines. Genetic studies suggest that approximately 16 million men today, about 0.5% of the world's male population, carry a Y chromosome lineage, likely originating from him or his close male relatives, making him one of history's most prolific reproducers. White House sheep. During World War I, President Woodrow Wilson and First Lady Edith kept a flock of sheep on the White House lawn to reduce landscaping costs and demonstrate resource conservation. The wool was auctioned to raise money for the American Red Cross, combining practicality with patriotic symbolism. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic. In 1962, an unusual psychogenic illness began at a girls' school in Tanganyika, now Tanzania, starting with uncontrollable laughter that lasted for hours or days. The laughing sickness spread to surrounding communities, affecting thousands and forcing dozens of schools to close temporarily. The epidemic lasted several months and remains one of the best documented cases of mass psychogenic illness. Thomas Crapper's contributions. Thomas Crapper, 1836-1910, didn't invent the flush toilet, which existed in various forms for centuries before him. However, he did improve toilet design, popularized modern bathroom fixtures, and held 9 plumbing patents, including the ball cock mechanism. Contrary to popular belief, the word crap predates Crapper and isn't derived from his name. British Army domestic actions. The last time British Army troops deliberately killed civilians in mainland Britain was during labor disputes in 1911. 2 protesters were shot during a railway strike in Liverpool, and days later, 2 more were killed during strikes in Llanelli, Wales. This represented the last use of lethal military force against British citizens on the mainland. Remarkable battlefield courage. Colonel Soward of Napoleon's 2nd Lancers fought on horseback throughout the Battle of Waterloo, 1815, despite having had his arm amputated without anesthesia just the day before, demonstrating extraordinary endurance and commitment to his military duty. Arthur Conan Doyle's sporting career. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, played as a goalkeeper for Portsmouth Association Football Club under the pseudonym A.C. Smith in the 1880s. Beyond his famous literary career, he was also a physician, spiritualist, and advocate for judicial reform. The last Rorke's Drift defender. Frank Bourne was the last surviving defender of Rorke's Drift, 1879, where approximately 150 British troops held off 3,000 to 4,000 Zulu warriors. He rose from private to lieutenant colonel and lived to be 91, dying on May 8, 1945, VE Day, marking the Allied victory in Europe. Royal assassination attempts. On May 15, 1800, King George III survived 2 assassination attempts in one day. In the morning, James Hadfield fired at him in Hyde Park, but missed, hitting a bystander. That evening, another mentally disturbed man attempted to shoot him at the Theatre Royal. The king insisted the performance continue, showing remarkable composure. Unusual matrimonial selection. A 17th century king of Arakan, in modern-day Myanmar, reportedly selected wives by having candidates stand in the sun, then conducting a blind smell test of their sweat-soaked garments. Those whose scent displeased him were given as wives to lesser nobles, reflecting historical practices where personal hygiene played a role in royal matchmaking. Animal trials. In 1510, rats who destroyed a barley field in France were formally summoned to trial. Their defense lawyer, Bartholomew Chassenet, successfully argued that his clients couldn't safely attend court due to the presence of cats and dogs. The judge accepted this argument based on the legal principle that a reasonable fear of death excused court attendance and postponed the trial indefinitely. Self-mummification. In 2015, CT scans of a 1,000-year-old Chinese Buddha statue revealed the mummified remains of a monk inside. The monk likely practiced sokushinbutsu, a ritual self-mummification where monks followed a strict diet, and gradually poisoned themselves over years to preserve their bodies after death, believing this achieved a state of enlightenment. Rapid military expansion. In 1939, at the outbreak of World War II, the U.S. Army numbered approximately 190,000 soldiers. By 1945, it had expanded to 8.3 million personnel, representing one of the most rapid military expansions in history and demonstrating America's industrial and organizational capabilities. Elizabeth Vere's dental problems. Queen Elizabeth the Virgor's teeth turned black and decayed in her later years due to her fondness for sugary foods and poor dental hygiene practices of the era. This led to the aristocratic fashion of blackening teeth, as commoners sought to emulate the Queen's appearance despite its origins in decay. World's first iron-framed building. The main mill at Shrewsbury, Flax Mill Maltings, in Shropshire, England, built in 1796-97, was the world's first iron-framed building. While modest in height, it pioneered the structural system later used in all skyscrapers, leading to its nickname, the grandparent of skyscrapers. The building has been restored and is now open to visitors. Ancient astronomers. Babylonian astronomers identified 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, by the 2nd millennium BCE. The Greek astronomer Aristarchus of Samos, 310-230 BCE, correctly proposed that Earth orbits the Sun, the heliocentric model. Nearly 1,800 years before, Copernicus popularized the idea in Renaissance Europe. Royal canine armor. King Henry VIII of England had a suit of armor made for his dog, likely a hunting hound or mastiff. This custom armor symbolized both the king's extravagance and the high status of royal hunting dogs in Tudor England. Origin of quarantine. The word quarantine comes from quarantina, meaning 40 days, in 14th century Venetian Italian. During the Black Death pandemic, Venice imposed a 40-day isolation period on ships and travelers entering the city's lagoon, establishing one of the first systematic public health measures against infectious disease. The last Japanese holdout. Lieutenant Hiru Onoda continued fighting World War II in the Philippines until 1974, refusing to believe Japan had surrendered in 1945. He maintained his military campaign for 29 years until his former commanding officer personally traveled to the Philippines to relieve him of duty. He returned to Japan as both a hero and an anachronism. Gentlemanly warfare. During the 1759 British siege of Madras, now Chennai, India, French forces formally complained that British defenders had fired upon their headquarters. The British promptly apologized for this breach of military etiquette, illustrating how 18th century warfare often maintained certain codes of conduct even amid deadly conflict. Blackening the bride. In parts of rural Scotland and Northern Ireland, a pre-wedding tradition called blackening the bride involved covering the bride and groom with messy substances like soot, mud, molasses, feathers, and flour. The messy ritual was believed to ward off evil spirits and bring good fortune. Modified versions of this tradition continue in some Scottish communities today. The origin of OK. The term OK originated in Boston during an 1830s fad for humorous misspellings and abbreviations. All correct, intentionally misspelling all correct, became OK in print. The abbreviation gained widespread popularity during Martin Van Buren's 1840 presidential campaign when his supporters formed Old Kinderhook, OK, clubs, named after his New York hometown. Today, it's one of the most universally recognized terms worldwide. British imperial reach. Historical research suggests that Britain has invaded, occupied, or fought. Conflicts in territories of approximately 171 of today's 193 UN member states throughout its imperial history. This represents about 90% of the world's countries, demonstrating the extraordinary reach of the British Empire at its height. The Halifax gibbet. The Halifax gibbet was an early guillotine-like execution device used in Yorkshire, England, from the 13th century until 1650. It predated the French Revolution's guillotine by several hundred years and inspired the Scottish maiden execution device used during the reign of Mary, Queen of Scots. The Halifax gibbet's use for relatively minor offenses like theft reflected the harsh justice systems of medieval and early modern England. Eastern Front casualties. During just 50 days of fighting on the Eastern Front in July-August 1943, including the Battle of Kursk, German and Soviet casualties exceeded the combined total losses of the United States and Great Britain for the entire Second World War. This staggering statistic highlights the often overlooked scale and brutality of the Eastern Front. Premarital pregnancy rates. In England, around 1800, approximately 40% of first-time brides were pregnant at marriage. This high rate of bridal pregnancy reflects both the common practice of couples becoming intimately involved after betrothal but before marriage, and the reality that pregnancy often precipitated marriage among the working classes. Mark Twain's cosmic prediction. Mark Twain famously noted his connection to Halley's Comet, saying, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." Remarkably, he died on April 21, 1910, just one day after the comet's closest approach to Earth during that orbit. The comet returns approximately every 76 years, with its next appearance expected in 2061. Dartmoor's Bronze Age landscape. Dartmoor in Devon, England, contains the highest concentration of Bronze Age remains in Britain. The 400 square miles of moorland preserve numerous prehistoric monuments, including 18 stone circles, 75 stone rows, hundreds of settlement sites, and thousands of burial cairns dating from approximately 2500-700 BCE. Hitler's iconic mustache. Adolf Hitler originally wore a larger, bushier mustache typical of the era. He trimmed it to the distinctive toothbrush style during World War I to accommodate a gas mask, which required a tight seal against the face. This practical wartime modification became one of history's most recognizable and infamous facial features. Women physicians in World War I? Dr. Flora Murray and Dr. Louisa Garrett Anderson, suffragists and life partners, were rejected from British military medical service in 1914 due to their gender. They established the Women's Hospital Corps with all-female staff, operating hospitals in Paris and London that treated thousands of wounded soldiers. Their success led the War Office to appoint Murray as Major in the British Army, the first woman to hold that rank. 2 significant car accidents. In 1931, Winston Churchill was nearly killed in New York City when struck by a car while crossing Fifth Avenue, having looked the wrong way on the one-way street. That same year, a young British aristocrat named John Scott Ellis almost hit Adolf Hitler with his car in Munich. These near misses with 2 figures who would become central to World War II illustrate how seemingly minor incidents could have dramatically altered history. D.H. Lawrence's wartime troubles. Author D.H. Lawrence and his German wife Frida were expelled from their Cornwall village during World War I under suspicion of signaling to German submarines using laundry on their clothesline. This incident reflects the intense paranoia and xenophobia toward Germans and perceived sympathizers during the war. Lawrence was placed under military surveillance for the remainder of the conflict. The Wars of the Roses, naming. The conflicts between the houses of Lancaster and York, 1455-1487, weren't called the Wars of the Roses by contemporaries. This name first appeared in Sir Walter Scott's 1829 novel Anne of Geierstein, referring to the red and white rose symbols of the rival houses. Historians later adopted the term, though some modern scholars prefer the Cousins' War to emphasize the familial relationships between the combatants. Nelson's preservation. After Admiral Horatio Nelson's death at the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805, his body was preserved in a cask of brandy, later replaced with spirits of wine, for the journey back to England rather than buried at sea as was customary. This unconventional preservation method allowed for his state funeral in London, where he was interred in St. Paul's Cathedral. The battlefield cry of havoc. In medieval warfare, the command Havoc released soldiers from formation discipline and authorized unrestricted looting and plundering. This order was only to be given when victory was certain, as it essentially dissolved military order. Unauthorized cries of havoc were severely punished, sometimes by execution, as they could lead to premature breakdown of battle formations and jeopardize the army's success. Colonial acquisition as royal gift. On January 1, 1886, the British government formally annexed Upper Burma following the Third Anglo-Burmese War and presented it to Queen Victoria as a New Year's and birthday gift. This symbolic gesture highlighted the connection between imperial expansion and the monarchy, while masking the violent military campaign that preceded the annexation. The Wright brothers' first flight witnesses. The historic first powered flight by the Wright brothers on December 17, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, was witnessed by fewer than 10 people, despite its world-changing significance. Those present included 5 local residents and several life-saving station workers. The brothers' achievement received little immediate press coverage. Oldest operating McDonald's. The oldest continuously operating McDonald's restaurant is located in Downey, California, opened in 1953. Unlike most early McDonald's, it was franchised directly from the McDonald brothers rather than Ray Kroc's later corporation. It maintained its original architecture and signage until joining the McDonald's Corporation in 1990, and still features unique design elements today. William the Conqueror's chaotic coronation. When William the Conqueror was crowned at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066, his Norman guards mistook the traditional shouts of acclamation for an uprising and began attacking bystanders. They also set nearby buildings on fire in the ensuing chaos. This violent start to his reign symbolized the tensions between the Norman conquerors and the conquered Anglo-Saxon population. Pavlov's house at Stalingrad. Pavlov's house, a fortified apartment building defended by Sergeant Yakov Pavlov and his platoon during the Battle of Stalingrad, held out against German forces for 2 months in 1942. The Soviet defenders turned the building into an impregnable fortress. German forces reportedly suffered more casualties trying to capture this single building than they did during the entire Battle of Paris in 1940. Churchill's wartime speeches. Of Winston Churchill's most famous 1940 speeches, Blood, Toil, Tears, and Sweat, Fight Them on the Beaches, Finest Hour, and The Few, only the Finest Hour speech was actually broadcast live on radio. The others were delivered to the House of Commons, where recording was prohibited. BBC actors initially read versions for broadcast, and Churchill himself recorded them only in 1949 for historical preservation. Varying timelines of LGBTQIA rights. The decriminalization of homosexuality occurred at widely different times around the world. Italy, 1890, not 1870. England and Wales, 1967. Scotland, 1980. Northern Ireland, 1982. Isle of Man, 1992. And the Australian state of Tasmania, 1997. In the United States, sodomy laws remained enforceable in 14 states until the Supreme Court's Lawrence v. Texas decision in 2003. Many countries still criminalize same-sex relationships today. Telephone greetings. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the practical telephone, proposed ahoy as the standard telephone greeting. However, Thomas Edison's suggestion of hello, a modification of hello, ultimately prevailed. Hello was rarely used in conversation before telephones, but became one of the world's most common greetings because of this technological adoption. Castro assassination attempts. The Cuban government claims there were over 600 attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro during his leadership, 1959-2008. Declassified CIA documents confirm numerous plots involving exploding cigars, poison diving suits, toxic pills, and contaminated milkshakes, among other methods. The frequency and creativity of these attempts made Castro's security protocols extraordinarily strict. The Dancing Plague. In July 1518, a woman named Frau Tropea began dancing uncontrollably in Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire. Within a month, approximately 400 people joined in this involuntary dancing, with many dancing until they collapsed from exhaustion or died from heart attacks and strokes. This was not the first such outbreak in Europe. Similar choriomania events were recorded in the 14th and 15th centuries. Modern theories suggest ergot poisoning, stress-induced psychosis, or religious ritual as possible explanations. The dueling prime minister. On May 27, 1798, British Prime Minister William Pitt, the younger, fought a duel with George Tierney, MP, after Tierney took offense at Pitt's suggestion that he was obstructing the defense of the realm. Both men missed their shots, possibly deliberately, and honor was satisfied. This was the last time a sitting British Prime Minister participated in a duel. Concorde pilots versus astronauts. During its operational history, 1976-2003, there were only 14 qualified Concorde captains at British Airways and a similar number at Air France, totaling fewer than 30 pilots qualified to command the supersonic airliner. This is fewer than the number of people who had traveled to space as astronauts or cosmonauts by the time Concorde was retired, highlighting the aircraft's exclusivity and technical demands. Lituya Bay mega tsunami. On July 9, 1958, an earthquake triggered a landslide in Lituya Bay, Alaska, creating a mega tsunami that reached a height of 1,720 feet, 524 meters, taller than the Empire State Building. This remains the highest tsunami wave ever recorded. Amazingly, a fishing boat with 2 people aboard rode over the wave and survived, providing eyewitness testimony to this extraordinary natural disaster. Marcus Aurelius on horseback. The equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, created around 175 CE, is the only large ancient Roman bronze statue to survive largely intact. Unlike most Roman bronzes, which were melted down over the centuries, this statue survived because medieval Christians mistakenly believed it depicted Constantine, the first Christian emperor. The original is now preserved in the Capitoline Museums, with a replica in the Piazza del Campidoglio. The unsinkable stoker. Arthur John Priest was a stoker who survived an extraordinary series of maritime disasters. A collision on RMS Asturias, 1908. A collision on RMS Olympic, 1911. The sinking of RMS Titanic, 1912. The sinking of HMS Alcantara, 1916. The sinking of HMHS Britannic, 1916. And the sinking of SS Donegal, 1917. His remarkable survival through these incidents earned him the nickname the Unsinkable Stoker, though he eventually died of pneumonia in 1937. Imperial succession. The Roman Empire existed for nearly 2 centuries before a smooth father-to-son succession occurred. When Marcus Aurelius was succeeded by his biological son, Commodus, in 180 CE, it marked the first time a Roman emperor who died naturally was succeeded by his son born during his reign. This surprisingly rare dynastic transition highlights the instability of imperial succession in Rome. Nazi use of the guillotine. While the guillotine is strongly associated with the French Revolution, the Nazis also extensively used guillotines for executions. In 1936, Hitler ordered the distribution of 20 guillotines to prisons across Germany. According to Nazi records, approximately 16,500 people were executed by guillotine between 1933 and 1945, including many resistance members, political dissidents, and Allied spies. The fictional country of Poyais. In the 1820s, Scottish soldier Gregor MacGregor invented a fictional Central American country called Poyais. He appointed himself cacique, prince, printed currency, issued land certificates, and raised a $200,000 loan, equivalent to millions today, from investors. Hundreds of Scottish settlers sailed to the non-existent paradise, discovering too late they had been defrauded. Many died before being rescued. MacGregor escaped serious punishment and continued similar schemes in France. Accidental microwave invention. The microwave oven was invented in 1945 by Percy Spencer, an engineer at Raytheon, who noticed that a magnetron radar device he was testing melted a chocolate bar in his pocket. Intrigued, he deliberately tested popcorn kernels and then an egg, which exploded in a colleague's face. The first commercial microwave oven, the Radarange, debuted in 1947 but was 6 feet tall and weighed 750 pounds. Bulgaria's unique wartime position. On September 8, 1944, Bulgaria found itself simultaneously at war with all four major European belligerents of World War II: Germany, the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom. This unique situation arose when Bulgaria declared war on Germany while still technically at war with the Allies, creating a 24-hour period of universal belligerence before the Allies recognized Bulgaria's switch to their side. Wartime blackout dangers. During the first 6 months of World War II, September 1939 to March 1940, more British civilians died in road accidents caused by the nighttime blackout than were killed in German air raids. The mandatory blackout, designed to prevent German bombers from identifying targets, led to a sharp increase in vehicle and pedestrian accidents in darkened streets, resulting in approximately 4,000 deaths. The year without summer. In 536 CE, a series of massive volcanic eruptions, possibly including Krakatoa, ejected so much ash into the atmosphere that it caused global cooling of approximately 2.5 degrees Celsius. This triggered crop failures, famine, and social unrest across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Modern climatologists consider it the beginning of the coldest decade in the last 2,000 years, and possibly the worst year to be alive in human history. Changing urban centers. The world's largest urban centers have shifted dramatically throughout history. In 1 CE, Rome and Alexandria were the largest cities. By 500 CE, Constantinople and Ctesiphon. In 1000 CE, Cordoba and Kaifeng. By 1500, Beijing and Cairo. And by 2000, Tokyo and Mexico City. This pattern reflects the rise and fall of empires and the shifting centers of economic and political power. Hitler's American nephew. William Patrick Hitler, Adolf Hitler's British-born nephew, moved to the United States in 1939 after unsuccessfully attempting to benefit from his uncle's rise to power in Germany. After publishing an article titled "Why I Hate My Uncle" in Look magazine, he joined the U.S. Navy in 1944 to fight against Nazi Germany. Following the war, he changed his surname to Stuart Houston, moved to Long Island, and lived a quiet life until his death in 1987. Ancient plumbing. The Neolithic settlement of Skara Brae, c. 3000 BCE, in Scotland's Orkney Islands, featured stone dwellings with primitive drainage systems believed to be early toilets. At the Minoan Palace of Knossos in Crete, and 1700 BCE, archaeologists discovered sophisticated plumbing, including flushing toilets, demonstrating that sanitation technology was surprisingly advanced in some ancient civilizations thousands of years before modern plumbing. Controversial Nobel Peace Prize nominations. The Nobel Peace Prize nomination archives reveal surprising candidates, including Adolf Hitler, nominated in 1939 by a Swedish parliamentarian as an ironic anti-nomination, Benito Mussolini, 1939, and Joseph Stalin, 1945 and 1948. These controversial nominations highlight the political nature of the nomination process, though none of these dictators came close to winning the actual prize. Prohibition misconceptions. During American Prohibition, 1920-1933, it wasn't illegal to drink alcohol. The 18th Amendment and Volstead Act prohibited the production, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors, but not their possession or consumption. People with existing alcohol supplies could legally consume them at home, and religious sacramental wine, medicinal alcohol, and industrial alcohol remained legal, creating significant loopholes. Western Front recovery operations. The British government officially halted its systematic search for war dead on the Western Front in September 1921, when recovery teams were still finding approximately 500 bodies per week. The decision was made for practical and financial reasons, despite knowing many fallen soldiers would remain undiscovered. Ongoing construction and farming in the former battlefields continues to unearth World War I remains to this day. Britain's wartime witch. Helen Duncan, a Scottish medium, was one of the last people convicted under Britain's Witchcraft Act of 1735. In 1944, during World War II, she was imprisoned for claiming to conjure the spirit of a sailor from the recently sunk HMS Barham, a ship whose loss was not yet public knowledge. Her case contributed to the eventual repeal of the antiquated witchcraft laws in 1951. Los Angeles and railway development. Contrary to popular belief, Los Angeles developed initially as a railway city, not an automobile city. By 1911, the sprawling LA metropolitan area was served by the Pacific Electric Railway, the Red Car system, the largest interurban electric railway system in the world with over 1,000 miles of track. The system's dismantling in favor of highways from the 1930s to 1960s reshaped the city into its car-dependent form. Flatulent entertainment. Medieval court jesters provided various forms of entertainment for monarchs, including musical performances, juggling, storytelling, and acrobatics. During the reign of Henry II of England, 1154-1189, a jester named Roland the Farter held a unique position, performing an act called Unum Saltum et Siffletum et Unum Bumbalum. One jump, one whistle, and one fart every Christmas. For this service, he was granted a manor in Suffolk with 30 acres of land. The Tower of London's last prisoner. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy who flew to Scotland in 1941 in an unauthorized peace mission, became the last state prisoner held in the Tower of London when he was briefly detained there in May 1941. His short stay marked the end of the tower's near millennium-long use as a state prison, though it continues as a military installation and tourist attraction. UFO landing laws. In 1954, the town of Châteauneuf-du-Pape in southern France enacted a municipal ordinance prohibiting the landing, takeoff, or flying of flying saucers within town limits. Mayor Lucien Jeune passed this odd law during a UFO sighting wave across France. Despite its absurdity, the law has never been repealed and remains technically in force today, serving as a quirky tourist attraction. Nuclear near-miss. During the Cuban Missile Crisis on October 27, 1962, the USS Beale dropped practice depth charges on the Soviet submarine B-59 to force it to surface. Unknown to the Americans, the submarine carried a nuclear torpedo, and its stressed crew considered launching it, believing World War III had begun. Launch required unanimous agreement from 3 officers, but submarine officer Vasily Arkhipov refused to give his consent, potentially preventing nuclear war. The Puckle gun. The Puckle gun, patented in 1718, was one of the first machine guns. Its inventor, James Puckle, designed 2 versions, one firing conventional round bullets for use against Christian enemies, and another firing square bullets against Turks and other heathens to inflict more painful wounds and demonstrate the benefits of Christian civilization. Though technically innovative, the weapon proved impractical and was never widely adopted. Resistance begets. During the German occupation of France in World War II, French bakers occasionally used hollow baguettes to smuggle messages, documents, and small items for the resistance. While the baguette did become a symbol of French identity and resilience during the occupation, the extent of its use for smuggling has likely been romanticized in popular accounts of wartime resistance. Corporate cost-cutting. In 1987, American Airlines famously saved approximately $40,000 annually by eliminating 1 olive from each salad served in first class. This minor change, championed by then-President Robert Crandall, became a classic business school example of how small cost reductions can yield significant savings at scale. The airline continued to look for similar efficiencies, later saving $100,000 by removing a single strawberry from dessert plates. Double atomic bombing survivor. Japanese engineer Tsutomu Yamaguchi experienced both atomic bombings in World War II. He was in Hiroshima on business on August 6, 1945, when the first bomb fell, suffering burns but surviving. He returned to his hometown of Nagasaki, where he was again exposed to radiation when the second bomb dropped on August 9th. Despite this double exposure, Yamaguchi lived to age 93, dying in 2010, and became an advocate for nuclear disarmament. Edward II's disputed death. King Edward II of England was deposed in 1327 and allegedly murdered at Berkeley Castle. While contemporary accounts simply state he died in captivity, a later chronicle claimed he was killed by having a red-hot poker inserted into his rectum, a particularly cruel method chosen to leave no visible marks on the royal body. Modern historians dispute this account, with some suggesting Edward may have escaped and lived in exile. The world's oldest prosthetic. In 1997, archaeologists discovered what might be the world's oldest prosthetic, an engraved wooden toe from ancient Egypt, fitted to a noblewoman from around 3,000 years ago. It wasn't just practical, it was crafted with a sense of style for open-toe sandals. Downfall by a gamecock? A curious story tells of highwayman Dick Turpin, who is said to have hastened his own downfall by murdering a prized gamecock on 2nd October 1738. The ensuing conflict with his hunting associate supposedly brought the matter to the attention of local justices, though historians still debate the full details. The shortest war in history. The Anglo-Zanzibar War of 27 August 1896 is recognized as the shortest war ever, lasting only about 38 to 40 minutes. After a brief naval bombardment, the Zanzibari Sultan surrendered, with just one reported injury among British forces. The curious groaning ale. In early modern Europe and colonial America, there's a quirky tale that when a woman became pregnant, a special ale, dubbed groaning ale, was brewed and matured over her pregnancy. Consumed by the mother and midwife during labor, even the leftover brew was used to wash over the newborn. Historical evidence is thin, but it's an unforgettable story. Abraham Lincoln, the wrestler. Before becoming the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln was known as a fierce wrestler. He's reputed to have won around 300 bouts with only one recorded defeat, a knockout record that adds a whole new dimension to his legacy. A grisly family feud. There's a disturbing medieval tale in which King Henry VI allegedly ordered that two of his granddaughters be blinded and have their noses cut off as punishment after a family feud. Their mother even tried to kill the king with a crossbow before narrowly escaping. While this story is full of drama, its accuracy remains highly disputed. A name from an 11-year-old. Pluto, the dwarf planet, was named thanks to an 11-year-old schoolgirl's brilliant suggestion, which won a naming contest. Her idea forever changed our cosmic map and remains a charming reminder that history sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. Stalin's tragic family loss. Yakov Jugashvili, the eldest son of Joseph Stalin, had a heartbreaking story. Captured by the Nazis during WW and used as a bargaining chip, Stalin refused to negotiate his release. Yakov later died in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, underscoring the grim personal toll of totalitarian regimes. Charles Dickens' narrow escape. In 1865, Charles Dickens narrowly escaped disaster when the train he was riding on crossed a viaduct that later collapsed into a river. Miraculously, he managed to save the manuscript of his novel, Our Mutual Friend. Talk about a lucky break. The largest palace ever built. Emperor Gaozu of Han commissioned the Weiyang Palace complex near modern Xi'an around 200 BC, covering approximately 4.8 kilometers, 1,200 acres. It's considered the largest palace ever built, almost 7 times the size of Beijing's Forbidden City. Today, only ruins remain, but its scale is still awe-inspiring. The Emu War. In 1932, the government of Western Australia declared war on emus, native birds that were damaging crops. Despite deploying soldiers armed with machine guns, the war lasted less than a week and only a few emus were taken down. It's one of history's most bizarre military episodes. The first speeding ticket. On 28th January 1896, Walter Arnold drove his horseless carriage in Paddock Wood, Kent, at a speed of 8 mph, 4 times the then-imposed 2 sub-race number limit. With no red flag to warn the way, he was chased by a policeman on a bicycle and eventually fined. And that, folks, is the world's first speeding ticket. Puritan bans on celebration. During the English Civil War, the Puritan Parliament banned traditional celebrations. In 1644, they declared the last Wednesday of each month a mandatory fast day, and by 1647, All celebrations of Christmas and Easter were outlawed until the restoration of Charles II in 1660, a truly austere moment in history. A matter of terminology. Finally, a modern correction. Thanks to over 1 million social media corrections, what was once misnamed as a knitted knight's hat is actually a crocheted knight's helmet. It's a fun reminder that even history can get hilariously mixed up in translation. And that's a wrap on our 100 updated and corrected historical facts. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the quirks and surprises of history, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more fascinating stories, and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.